Ryan wasn't paying attention. His mind was elsewhere on the stack of unfinished reports waiting for him at the office, the frustrating conversation with his boss that morning, and the fact that he hadn't had a decent cup of coffee in days. So when he turned, cup in hand, and collided with someone, sending hot coffee splashing between them, he barely registered what had happened. "Oh crap," he started, but then he looked up. The woman standing in front of him gasped, looking down at her now coffee-stained blouse. She had long, dark hair that tumbled over her shoulders, and her wide brown eyes flickered between annoyance and shock. Ryan scrambled for napkins from the counter. "I am so sorry," he said, handing them to her. "That was completely my fault," she sighed, dabbing at the stain. "You think—" But there was no real malice in her voice, more exasperation than anger. "I'll pay for your dry cleaning," he offered quickly, "or buy you a new shirt." Or she looked up at him then, a small amused tilt to her lips. "Unless you're carrying a spare blouse in your back pocket, I don't see how that's going to help me right now." Ryan chuckled, relieved that she wasn't outright furious. "Yeah, fair point." She shook her head, still trying to blot out the stain. "This is what I get for trying to be productive before work," she muttered. Then she sighed and extended a hand. "I'm Lily, by the way." "You are." He took her hand, surprised by how warm it was. "Ryan." "Well, Ryan," she said, giving him a pointed look, "you owe me a new coffee." He grinned. "That I can do." They moved to the counter, and he ordered her a fresh latte, feeling strangely compelled to stay and talk to her. She was easy to talk to, not in a forced, small-talk kind of way, but in a way that made him forget about the stress clawing at his mind. "So what's your deal?" she asked as they waited for her drink. "My deal? You looked about 10 seconds away from having a mental breakdown before you nearly drowned me in coffee," she teased. He exhaled a laugh, shaking his head. "Work," he admitted. "It's been a week." She accepted the new cup from the barista and took a slow sip. "Let me guess, corporate job." "Too many meetings, not enough time to breathe." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you psychic?" "Nope," she said, "just observant." Ryan found himself smiling again, something he hadn't done much of lately. "What about you?" he asked. "What's your deal?" She leaned against the counter, cradling her coffee. "Freelance illustrator," which sounds a lot cooler than it actually is. "Half the time, I'm just chasing down clients for payments and convincing my mom that I have a real job." Ryan chuckled. "Sounds exhausting." "Oh, it is," she said. "But at least I don't have to sit through meetings." They stood there for a moment, the hum of the coffee shop around them. Ryan knew he should be heading to work, but for some reason, he didn't want to move just yet. Lily glanced at her watch and groaned. "Okay, I really have to go change before my meeting." She hesitated, then pulled a pen from her bag and scribbled something on a napkin. "Here," she said, handing it to him. He looked at the number. "In case you ever want to buy me another coffee," she said with a small smile. And then she was gone, disappearing into the crowded street. Ryan looked down at the napkin in his hand, a slow grin spreading across his face. Maybe today wasn't such a bad day after all. Ryan hadn't planned to text her. All day, he'd carried that napkin in his pocket, glancing at it between meetings, running his thumb over the ink as if that alone would help him decide what to do. He barely knew her, just a stranger he'd spilled coffee on, but something about Lily had clung to his mind like a song he couldn't shake. By the time he got home that evening, he was exhausted, mentally drained from work, physically tense from sitting at his desk all day, but instead of collapsing onto his couch, he pulled out his phone. "Ryan, hope your shirt survived. If not, I still owe you one." He hovered over the message, debating if it sounded too casual, too forced, but before he could overthink it, he sent it. Seconds passed, then a minute, then two. He laughed at himself, shaking his head. He was acting like a teenager. But then Lily, miraculously, the stain came out. Tragic, really. "Could have guilt tripped you into buying me a whole new outfit." Ryan chuckled. "Ryan, guess I dodged a bullet." "Lily, for now, but you still owe me coffee." Something warm curled in his chest. "Ryan, name a time and place." "Lily, tomorrow, same coffee shop." 7 p.m. He stared at the message. Tomorrow. It was impulsive. He barely knew her, but something in him didn't want to say no. Ryan, see you then. The next evening, Ryan arrived 10 minutes early, standing outside the coffee shop with his hands in his pockets. He told himself he wasn't nervous, but his heart picked up when he saw her approaching. Lily was wearing a soft sweater and jeans, her dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She spotted him immediately, her lips curving into a knowing smile. "Look at you," she teased, "early and everything." "I like to be prepared," he said with a shrug. She gave him a mock serious nod. "Very responsible of you." They stepped inside, the scent of roasted coffee wrapping around them. "You ordering?" she asked. "Yeah." "You want the same as last time?" She shot him a look. "You remember my order?" He didn't know why, but that made his stomach tighten in a strangely pleasant way. "Of course," he said. Lily studied him for a second before nodding. "All right, impress me." Ryan smirked and turned to the barista. "1 caramel latte, extra foam." The barista nodded, and Lily crossed her arms, pretending to look impressed. "Not bad." "You passed the test." They grabbed their drinks and found a small table in the corner. The hum of conversation filled the space, but Ryan barely noticed. "So," Lily said, stirring her drink, "tell me something random about yourself." He raised an eyebrow. "Random?" "Yeah, no boring work talk, just something about you." Ryan thought for a moment. "I used to play the guitar." Lily's eyes widened. "Seriously?" He nodded. "Haven't touched it in years, though." "Why not?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Life got busy." Lily rested her chin on her hand, watching him. "You should pick it up again." He chuckled. "You don't even know if I was any good." She grinned. "Doesn't matter. If you loved doing it, you should." Something about the way she said it made his chest tighten. "What about you?" he asked. "Something random." Lily thought for a moment, then smirked. "I can recite the entire script of The Princess Bride from memory." Ryan blinked. "You're joking." She leaned forward. "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father." "Prepare to die." Ryan laughed, shaking his head. "That's impressive and mildly concerning." Lily grinned. "I have many talents." They talked for hours, the coffee growing cold in their cups as they traded stories, teasing remarks, and easy laughter. Ryan hadn't felt this light in a long time. Eventually, the shop started closing and Lily stretched, letting out a small yawn. "All right, responsible early bird," she said, standing up. "Walk me home." Ryan hesitated, but only for a second. "Yeah, of course." They stepped outside, the night air cool against his skin. Their steps fell into an easy rhythm, the city buzzing around them. Lily lived a few blocks away, in a small apartment above a bookstore. She stopped at the entrance, turning to face him. "Well," she said, "this was fun." He nodded. "Yeah, it was." She tilted her head, studying him. "You gonna text me again?" Ryan met her gaze. "Do you want me to?" A slow smile spread across her lips. "Yeah," she said softly. Something in his chest tightened. "Then I will," he said. Lily nodded. "Good." She hesitated just for a second, then leaned in, pressing a quick, warm kiss to his cheek. Ryan barely had time to react before she pulled back, grinning. "Good night, Ryan." And just like that, she disappeared inside. Ryan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He hadn't expected this, any of it. But as he turned and walked back home, he knew one thing for certain. He was going to see her again. Ryan should have been asleep. Instead, he was staring at his phone, thumb hovering over the keyboard, rereading the last message Lily had sent him an hour ago. "Lily, I had fun tonight. Even if you're suspiciously good at remembering coffee orders, makes me think you do this often." He'd laughed when he read it, but now, lying in bed, his apartment dark except for the glow of his screen, he found himself hesitating. This wasn't normal for him. He wasn't the kind of guy to get caught up in impulsive connections, to let his mind wander to someone he barely knew. But Lily wasn't like anyone he'd met before. There was something about her, something effortlessly captivating. "Ryan, guess you'll have to keep seeing me to find out if I'm secretly a professional coffee spiller." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Minutes passed. Then Lily, dangerous offer, Ryan. I might take you up on that. He smiled to himself, rolling onto his back. He was already in trouble. It wasn't long before seeing Lily became a habit. They didn't plan it, not really. It just happened. Some nights, Ryan found himself walking into the coffee shop after work, and she'd be there, sketchbook open, a cup of tea half finished beside her. Other times, she'd text him first, asking if he wanted to grab a bite to eat or take a walk through the park when the city lights started flickering on. It was easy. Easier than anything had felt in a long time. They talked about everything: movies, music, childhood memories. He told her about the time he'd broken his arm falling out of a tree when he was 10. She told him about the summer she'd spent backpacking through Europe because she'd felt stuck and needed to do something reckless. She fascinated him, and somehow he could tell she was just as drawn to him. It was in the way she laughed at his sarcasm, the way she nudged his shoulder when he said something ridiculous, the way she looked at him like she was trying to figure him out, piece by piece. One evening, they ended up at a small bookstore downtown. Ryan had been about to suggest dinner, but Lily had pulled him inside, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the shelves. "You a big reader?" he asked as she ran her fingers along the spines. She gave him a pointed look. "Are you telling me you're not?" he smirked. "I read, just not as obsessively as you, apparently." Lily gasped dramatically. "Unacceptable, I need to fix this." Before he could argue, she grabbed a book off the shelf and shoved it into his hands. "There." "Homework." Ryan glanced down at the title, then back at her. "You're assigning me books now?" "Absolutely," she grinned. "If we're going to be friends, you need to have better taste." Something flickered in his chest at the word friends. Was that what they were? Because every time she smiled at him, every time he caught himself staring at her lips, it felt like something else. Something more. But he didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, he bought the book, because if she wanted him to read it, he would. The almost moment happened a week later. They were sitting on a bench near the waterfront, the city stretching around them, the sound of the waves mingling with distant laughter from the nearby street. Lily had been talking about some ridiculous client she was dealing with, and Ryan had been listening, really listening, because he liked the way she told stories, the way her hands moved when she got animated. And then she'd stopped mid-sentence, turning to look at him. "What?" he asked, amused. She hesitated. "Then you ever think about how weird this is?" Ryan frowned. "How weird what is?" "This," she gestured between them. "We didn't even know each other 2 weeks ago." He thought about it. Then, without really meaning to, he reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Lily's breath hitched. His fingers lingered, just for a second. And suddenly, the space between them felt smaller, tighter. Ryan didn't move, didn't look away, neither did she. For a moment, the world shrank down to just the two of them. Then Lily exhaled, a small, almost nervous laugh escaping her lips. "Okay," she said, shaking her head, "this is getting suspiciously rom-com-y." Ryan let out a breath, forcing himself to lean back. "Yeah," he said, trying to ignore the way his pulse was hammering. "We should probably cut back on the coffee shop meetings." "Too cliché." Lily grinned, but there was something in her eyes, something unreadable. "Maybe," she murmured, but neither of them moved, and Ryan knew without a doubt that whatever this was, it wasn't just friendship. Ryan wasn't sure when everything shifted. One minute, he and Lily were comfortably orbiting around each other, sharing late-night conversations and stolen moments that blurred the line between friendship and something more. The next, he couldn't stop thinking about her. It wasn't just attraction, though God knew that was there, humming beneath every glance, every accidental touch. It was the way she made him feel lighter, like the weight of everything: work, expectations. The monotony of his daily life didn't press as hard when she was around. And yet, he hadn't made a move. Not because he didn't want to, but because something in him hesitated, some unspoken fear of ruining whatever this was if he said the wrong thing, pushed too far too soon. But then came the night that changed everything. They had been walking through the city after dinner, the streets quieter than usual, the hum of traffic distant. It was late, but neither of them seemed ready to part ways. Lily was telling him about an art commission she'd taken on an illustration for a book cover, but Ryan wasn't really listening. Because all he could focus on was how beautiful she looked under the glow of the streetlights, how the breeze played with the strands of her hair, how her laughter wrapped around him like something warm and familiar. And then she stopped walking. He turned to face her, eyebrows furrowing. "What?" Lily hesitated. Then she reached for his hand. Ryan barely had time to process the warmth of her fingers wrapping around his before she pulled him forward, leading him down a quieter street, past a closed cafe, until they reached a small park. The fountain in the center trickled softly, the benches empty, the world hushed around them. Ryan glanced at her, his pulse kicking up. "Lily, I need to ask you something," she interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. He swallowed. "Okay." She didn't let go of his hand. Instead, she studied him, her expression unreadable, like she was weighing something heavy in her mind. "Then, are we pretending?" Ryan's breath caught. "What?" Her grip on his fingers tightened slightly. "This," she said, voice softer now. "Us, are we pretending like it's nothing? Or are we just too stubborn to admit what's actually happening?" Ryan's heart slammed against his ribs. He could lie, could deflect, could make a joke, turn the moment into something light and easy. But he didn't. Because looking at her now, watching the way she held herself like she was bracing for impact, he knew she deserved the truth. "No," he said, voice rough. "I'm not pretending." Lily sucked in a breath. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly, carefully Ryan reached up, brushing his knuckles against her cheek. Her eyes fluttered closed for a second, and when they opened again, something had shifted between them, something deeper, something irreversible. Ryan exhaled shakily. "I think about you all the time," he admitted, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "I don't know what this is, but I know I don't want it to stop." Lily let out a soft, almost disbelieving laugh. "Me too," she whispered, and that was all it took. Ryan didn't think he just moved, cupping her face in his hands and closing the space between them. The moment their lips met, the world tilted. She was warm, soft, and everything he hadn't realized he'd been craving. Lily let out a quiet sound against his mouth, her fingers tangling in the front of his jacket, pulling him impossibly closer. Ryan was drowning in her, in the way she fit against him, in the way her breath hitched when he deepened the kiss. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate, but it was inevitable. When they finally pulled apart, foreheads touching, breath mingling, Lily let out a shaky laugh. "Well," she murmured, "that took long enough." Ryan chuckled, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "Yeah, it did." Lily pulled back slightly, studying him. "So now what?" she asked. Ryan didn't hesitate. "Now," he said, his voice steady, "we stop pretending." And just like that, everything changed. Ryan hadn't known it was possible to fall so fast. One moment, he and Lily had been in that strange, exhilarating space between friendship and something more, hovering on the edge of it. And then, in the span of a single kiss, they had crossed a line that neither of them wanted to erase. And now she was everywhere. Not just in the literal sense, though she was her texts lighting up his phone, her laughter echoing in his mind long after he left her side. But she was in the quiet moments, too. In the way he caught himself smiling for no reason. In the way he suddenly noticed how empty his apartment felt when she wasn't there. They were together constantly, though neither of them had officially labeled it. They didn't need to. It was in the way she grabbed his hand without thinking. In the way he kissed her forehead absent-mindedly when they parted ways. In the way she stole his sweatshirts and he never asked for them back. It was undeniable. And yet, there was still that small, nagging voice in the back of Ryan's mind. Because Lily was the kind of person who moved through life like a gust of wind, unpredictable, untamed. She was the kind of person who didn't stay in one place for too long, who chased whatever made her heart race with reckless abandon. and Ryan. He wasn't sure he could survive if she ever decided to leave, but he didn't say that. Instead, he let himself sink into her, into the way she made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he could be the kind of person who didn't overthink everything. Until the night that threatened to change everything. They were at his apartment, curled up on his couch, her legs draped over his lap as they half-watched a movie. He wasn't really paying attention to the screen, too focused on the way her fingers traced absent-minded patterns against his wrist. And then, out of nowhere, she said it. "I might be leaving." Ryan stiffened. Lily must have felt it because she immediately turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "I didn't mean I don't know for sure, I just—" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I got an offer, a big one. A publishing house in Seattle wants me to illustrate one of their upcoming books." Ryan's stomach twisted. Seattle. That was across the country. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice to stay even. "That's huge, Lily." "That's amazing." She studied him carefully, like she was trying to read between the lines of his words. "Yeah," she said slowly. "It is." Ryan exhaled, dragging a hand through his hair. "So what are you thinking?" Lily hesitated. "I don't know, I mean it's a dream opportunity, but—" She bit her lip. "It's complicated." He knew what she meant. Because it wasn't just about the job, it was about them. Ryan's chest tightened. "When do you have to decide?" "A week. A week." That wasn't enough time, not nearly. Lily shifted, her fingers threading through his. "Ryan, I don't want to lose this, us." His heart clenched. "Then don't," he said, his voice rough. She let out a breath, her forehead pressing against his. "I don't want to leave you." Ryan pulled her closer, his arms tightening around her. "Then don't," he repeated, softer this time. But they both knew it wasn't that simple. Because Lily had always been someone who chased her dreams without hesitation, and Ryan had always been someone who played it safe. And now, they were standing at a crossroads neither of them had seen coming. Ryan had never been the kind of man to ask someone to stay, but this was Lily. And the thought of her leaving, of walking away from everything they had built, everything they were still discovering, felt like someone had reached into his chest and twisted. The following days passed in a blur of stolen moments and unspoken words. They didn't talk about Seattle, not directly. Instead, they filled their time with late-night drives, shared meals, and quiet moments where she would rest her head on his shoulder, and he would pretend she wasn't slipping away from him. But the truth sat between them like a weight neither of them could ignore. One evening, as they sat on his rooftop, the city stretching out before them, Lily finally broke the silence. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan turned to her, his heart pounding. "Lily, I love what I do," she interrupted, her fingers gripping the edge of the blanket they had wrapped around themselves. "And this is everything I've worked for." "But then there's you." Ryan swallowed hard. "And what about me?" She turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "You make me want to stay." The confession hit him like a punch to the gut. He reached for her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then stay." Lily let out a shaky breath. "And what if I regret it? What if I wake up 6 months from now and wonder if I made the wrong choice?" Ryan stiffened. "Do you think you will?" She hesitated. And that hesitation cut deeper than anything she could have said. Ryan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Lily, I don't want to be the reason you hold yourself back." Her jaw tightened. "And I don't want to be the reason you get hurt." They stared at each other, the weight of everything pressing down on them. Finally, Ryan spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I love you." Lily's breath hitched. "I love you," he repeated, his fingers gripping hers tightly, "and I don't want to lose you. But if you need to go, if you need to see this through, I won't stand in your way." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ryan," he forced a small smile. "I just need to know one thing." "What?" she whispered. "If I asked you to stay, would you resent me for it?" She opened her mouth, closed it, and in that silence he had his answer. Ryan nodded, his chest aching. "Then you have to go." Lily let out a shaky breath, her hands gripping his shirt. "I don't want to leave you." "Then don't," he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. But if you do, his voice broke slightly, but he kept going. If you do, I need you to promise me something. What? That you'll come back. A tear slipped down her cheek. Ryan, I don't care how long it takes, he said, his voice raw. I don't care if it's a month or a year, just tell me this isn't the end. Lily let out a soft sob, her hands cupping his face. It's not, she promised. It's not. And then she kissed him, desperate and aching, as if she was trying to memorize the way he tasted, the way he felt, the way he loved her. It wasn't goodbye. It was a promise. Ryan didn't go to the airport. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But he knew if he saw her standing at the gate, suitcase in hand, he might beg her to stay. And he had promised himself he wouldn't do that. So instead, he buried himself in work, in routine, in anything that would keep his mind from drifting back to the way she had looked at him that last night. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months, and then one evening, as he stepped out of the coffee shop where they had first met, his phone buzzed. Lily, I'm coming home. Ryan's heart nearly stopped. And then, before he could even process it, another message. Lily, meet me where it all started. Ryan didn't hesitate, he ran. The coffee shop was nearly empty when he arrived, breathless and pulse racing. And then he saw her. Lily stood near the counter, her hair longer, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite name. Ryan's feet moved before his brain could catch up. And then she was in his arms, her hands gripping the back of his neck, her body pressed tightly against his. I missed you, she whispered against his skin. Ryan let out a shaky breath, his arms tightening around her. You came back. She pulled back just enough to look at him, her fingers brushing against his jaw. I told you it wasn't the end. He cupped her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. Are you staying? Lily smiled, her eyes shining. I realized something while I was gone. What? That a dream job means nothing if the person I want to share it with isn't there. Ryan's heart clenched. Lily, she pressed a finger to his lips. I love you, she said softly, and I'm not leaving again. Ryan didn't give her a chance to say anything else. He kissed her, pouring every ounce of longing, love, and relief into it. And this time, when she kissed him back, he knew. She was home, and she always would be.